The Not So Perfect Pair by StarcollectorSilas. Chapter 8. Well, this was it. Dazai was completely and totally fucked. He dropped his face onto his knees, taking a slow breath as he listened to Elise chatter happily in the next room, and heard Ango's overly enthusiastic responses. He shivered slightly. The temperatures had dropped drastically through the early evening, and now sitting on the windowsill, he let the draft from the window blow right up his back. Oda coughed nearby, and Dazai winced at the scratchy and strained sound. He could tell Oda was trying to stifle the coughing to not scare him. He wasn't sure if he actually appreciated the gesture. It made him feel like Oda didn't think he would be able to handle knowing the truth. He decided that Oda was also doing it to not scare Elise. That made him feel worse. "Are you cold?" Oda asked, drawing Dazai to look up from where he had buried his face between his knees. "A little, yeah," he said with a nod, watching Oda stir some kind of curry in a pot. Oda laughed, and Dazai could hear the way Ango had stopped responding to Elise for a moment to listen. It made him smile slightly. "I get that. I'm cold all the time now. Nothing to worry about. It's normal, apparently, with the medicine and all," Oda said, and he pointed to a folded zip-up hoodie sitting on one of the counters. "You can borrow that. You're getting the bus home, right?" he asked, his forehead creasing with concern. Dazai nodded, shifting and reaching to grab the hoodie, pulling on it. It was slightly warm. It had probably only finished drying just before he and Elise got here. It smelled nice. Oda sighed in annoyance, tutting slightly. "Seriously, if it was just you, you're almost 16 and can get the bus alone. But with Elise, you shouldn't have to get the bus home alone with Elise at night." Dazai hummed in absent-minded agreement, his thoughts straying to the way Chuya had been staring at the table when showing him his arm earlier. "I mean, Dad can drop you off, but..." Dazai was snapped out of his thoughts, narrowing his eyes. "Who?" he asked, voice dripping in petty false ignorance. His anger was misdirected, and he knew that, but it didn't stop the pang of resentment at hearing Oda so easily refer to Mori as Dad. Oda was old enough to remember when Mori had been a decent person. Dazai didn't have that luxury. Oda didn't get upset at Dazai's anger, however, just restarting his sentence calmly. "Mori can drop you off, but he won't pick you up? It's crazy. I'd rather he get the bus here and had a lift home." Oda hummed thoughtfully. "I'll let Ango drive you home," he decided. Dazai frowned. "Isn't Ango supposed to stay with you in case something happens?" he asked, trying not to sound too worried. Oda laughed a little again, shaking his head. "I'll be fine for an hour while he drives you home." Dazai just nodded, his thoughts straying again. His arms burned. What he had done earlier hadn't been enough. He had gotten halfway through before remembering the possibility that Chuya was his soulmate. And then he had gone back to class and promptly had both his theories confirmed. One, that Chuya was actually a soulmate, which wasn't hard to figure out. And two, that his self-harm was going to hurt Chuya. Brilliant. But he couldn't risk hurting Chuya. "I'm gonna kill your soulmate." His own words to Chuya. "I'm going to kill myself." He had a warm bowl pressed into his hands. He blinked in surprise, looking at Oda, who had another bowl in his own hands and was sitting at the counter. "Ango and Elise are going to eat and watch a movie together. I figured you had something on your mind you might want to talk about without the prying ears of your 12-year-old sister," Oda said with amusement as he started to eat. Dazai contemplated telling Oda for a moment, stirring the curry. It was more watered down than usual, and he couldn't smell the spice like he usually could. Likely for Oda's benefit. He probably struggled to eat spicy foods now. At least, struggled to keep it down. He wasn't very hungry, despite the way the teeth gnawing at his gut screamed otherwise. "Chuya's my soulmate," is what he settled on saying. Oda nodded, unsurprised. "That's great. I was going to ask, but figured you'd tell me. How did you know? Does Chuya know?" Dazai just continued watching the curry as he stirred it. There was barely any rice in the bowl. It was more like a soup. "Arms, and no," he said blankly. Oda made a soft sound of acknowledgement, looking sympathetic. "And you can't tell him because..." I don't want him to know. Dazai finished for him, finally taking a spoonful of the curry. It didn't taste bad, it just wasn't as good as Oda used to make it. It made him feel even less hungry, but he kept eating anyway. He's going to find out eventually, Oda said, his voice surprisingly soft. You can't hide it forever, especially not when you get your mark. All it'll take is one of your little play fights where you hit each other a little too hard and you both suddenly have matching bruises where you just punched each other. Dazai nodded numbly. Oda didn't know Mori still hit him and Elise was under strict orders not to tell. The self-harm was not his biggest worry. We still have a few exams. Our last one is next Monday, Dazai said quietly. He probably won't start worrying about who his soulmate is again until next Tuesday. He laughed, smiling slightly, his cheeks warming as he thought. Though Chuya is very persistent and stubborn, I won't be surprised if the first thing he does after sleeping for most of Monday afternoon and night is launch headfirst into a full-scale investigation. Knowing him, he'll enroll me as his secondary investigator too. Oda chuckled, raising an eyebrow, almost in disbelief. With the way you talk about him, nobody in their right mind will be surprised with the knowledge you two are soulmates. Dazai shook his head, wrinkling his nose. Chuya has no reason to like me. I know Chuya's type, and I am not it. Oda rolled his eyes, smiling fondly. You know, I remember when you and Chuya were around 8, and you were both loud and proud about the fact that you were going to marry each other when you were older. Mori wasn't very happy, but Chuya's parents found it incredibly endearing. You had Kyoka draw pictures of your wedding in crayon. I remember listening to you bickering over who had to wear the wedding dress until Koyo had told you that you would both be able to wear suits. Dazai didn't remember that. He wondered if Chuya did. He does remember when Chuya had first realized he didn't like girls, and gotten upset about how he was different, and not understanding it. He does remember finding Chuya crying behind a tree. Because it was dark, Chuya had always been scared of heights and refused to actually climb a tree without him there. He does remember sitting in the dark next to him, his nice trousers Mori had bought for him contrasting Chuya's ripped denim shorts that had been patched so many times that they were more patched than original fabric, and he remembers wishing they could swap. He had been so jealous of Chuya's effortless coolness, of his ripped clothes and baggy t-shirts, of his plastered knees and scruffy haircut. He had always been, and still was, jealous of Chuya, of his clothes, of his way of speaking, of his hair, of his friends, of the way his grades didn't matter, and above all, of how Chuya wanted to be an artist, to pursue writing and poetry, and how his parents had stuck his first attempt at a proper poem on the fridge with a magnet in each corner, 2 stars, a cat, and a pretty fountain pen which had been Chuya's favorite. It had been right up there with Kyoka's drawing and Koyo's pictures, and when Dazai had eventually picked up art and drew Chuya a picture of him, he had stared at the place it occupied beside the poem with a new kind of hurt worming its way into his chest. Looking at his drawing displayed so proudly next to Chuya's writing had made him want to cry, and he hadn't known why. And he hadn't been able to stop himself from crying for an hour when Chuya's dad had oh so carefully hugged him when he was trying to ask why it was up there. He had been 10 at the time, and it was the first time he had cried around Chuya's family, and he could still count on one hand how many times that happened. More importantly, he remembered promising Chuya that it didn't matter if he never found anyone to love his entire life, because they could just get married instead. He had promised that if Chuya didn't fall in love, he wouldn't either. He was a liar, because it took Chuya ages to fall in love for the first time, and the entire time Dazai had been blatantly in love with him. He refused to recall what happened next, determined that it meant nothing, but he remembered walking home well past midnight with Chuya's hand in his, and remembered the gentle hugs and the relief on the faces of Chuya's parents. So he couldn't say anything in response. He stayed quiet, and after a few moments, Oda sighed. I'm sure you and Chuya will be fine. Now, tell me about the game you had been playing. Legend of Hyrule? Dazai smiled and rolled his eyes. Legend of Zelda, Oda. Oh yeah, that's the, green elf guy. No, Zelda is the princess. The green elf guy is Link. Why is it not the Legend of Link then? Oh my god. It took Dazai only a few seconds to struggle out of Koyo's firm grasp on his upper arm, and he heard her exasperated shout of his name as he ran after Chuya. Chuya was a bit faster than he was, but Chuya had run into the forest, not the field. He was embarrassed. He wanted to hide, not to run. Luckily for Dazai, at this age, Chuya was not very balanced, and he would be hindered by having to fight through the low branches and bushes. Dazai slowed, panting, forcing his breath to calm as he tried to think. Where would he hide? Cautiously, Dazai walked a little further until the trees thinned, and right in the middle of a small clearing was a big oak tree, the branches reaching into the partially cloudy sky and the stars shining down through the lack of leaves. Just past the big tree there was another one, slightly smaller and with lower branches, and between two of the thicker branches rested a slab of wood that he had found in an old dump site nearby. Naturally, Chuya wasn't up there. He was terrified of heights. Maybe if I could control gravity and I could fly. I don't want to fall if I can't catch myself, Chuya had said. If you could control gravity, I would take it away. Yeah, I'd be like an anti-hero. No, anti-superpowers. I would be an anti-hero too though, knowing me. Dazai had responded with a wrinkled nose. What's an anti-hero? He could remember Chuya asking, his voice clear in his mind. A person that does bad things for a good cause, or for a cause they believe to be good. Oh, I could believe you would be one of those. I would just be what you were, I think. Unless I could be a really good guy. Like a detective. We could be detectives, Dazai. That sounds super cool. You would be a terrible detective. You would be in the mafia. You'd be a bad guy. Hey, why do you get to be a detective while I don't? We should be able to stay together. Why can't we both be in the mafia? Or we could have a cool, what's the word for when the bad guys get good? A redemption arc? Yeah, we could get a fancy redemption arc and stay friends forever and then go from being in the mafia to being detectives and then retire with lots of money and we could go live in France or something. I would like that. Being detectives together? Being together, detectives or otherwise. Even if one of us was supposed to be the bad guy, I'd want to stay friends anyway. Of course we would. You would need to be around to stop me from being able to fly. You'd have to be there to annoy me. In every universe? In every universe. That conversation had happened while they fought to secure the slab of wood to the tree, Chuya firmly on the ground as Dazai dangled dangerously while fixing the rope in place. And now he could hear Chuya sobbing behind the tree and see his waterproof jacket where the fabric had caught when Chuya sat down. Dazai slowly went over, and Chuya jumped in a mix of surprise and fear when Dazai sat next to him, carefully unhooking Chuya's jacket from where it had been caught to avoid it ripping when Chuya tried to stand again. Go away, Chuya muttered angrily from where his face was buried in his arms, which were resting on his pulled-in knees. Dazai copied Chuya's position and didn't say anything. After a few seconds of silence, Chuya pressed into Dazai's side and lifted his face slightly. What's wrong with me, Dazai? Chuya asked between heaving sobs, and Dazai tilted his head to the sky. I don't know, he admitted quietly. He always knew what was wrong with people. When Chuya had pushed him from the slide, he had known his elbow was fractured before it even started swelling. When Chuya had tonsillitis, he had known from how Chuya described his throat hurting. He always knew. But this was emotional, it seemed, and he wasn't always sure with this stuff, and even then, he had no clue. Chuya just cried harder, so Dazai shifted so he could pull Chuya into a hug. You always know what's wrong. Why don't you know? Chuya cried, his hand making a fist in the soft fabric of Dazai's jumper. Dazai shook his head, and he felt like he might cry too. I don't know. I'm sorry, Chuya. Chuya screamed quietly into Dazai's chest, not knowing what to do with this anger, and Dazai's bottom lip trembled, and he sniffled. Maybe, Dazai started, being cut off by a hiccup and a tear. Maybe I don't know what's wrong because there's nothing wrong. Maybe you're okay. Maybe we're okay. Maybe there's nothing wrong with us. Maybe you can be normal. But we're not. But I'm not normal. Why can I not be normal? Chuya retaliated, his tears now soaking through Dazai's clothes. Maybe you're not. Okay, guess what? Big surprise. You're a freak of nature, Chuya. Dazai was just as surprised as Chuya was at his words, and Chuya pushed himself up to look at Dazai again. "What?" Chuya asked, and Dazai watched Chuya notice the tears on his face as well, and watched his face contort in confusion. "Why are you crying?" Dazai scoffed, surprisingly angry. Anger was normally Chuya's thing. "I don't know. Why are you crying?" he retorted. "Because you called me a freak of nature?" Chuya responded, baffled, but the tears had stopped, so Dazai counted that as a win. "So what? If you're so hell-bent on there being something wrong with you, why should I not comment on it? It hurts my feelings. I don't want to have something wrong with me." Chuya wailed, and the tears started again, spilling down Chuya's cheeks like a dam breaking. "I don't either, but you're saying there's something wrong with you, and if there's something wrong with you, then there's something wrong with me too. So maybe it doesn't matter. So what if you're the only guy in our class who doesn't like a girl? I don't either. So what if you get nervous around a mystery boy you won't tell me about? And so what if you had a dream where you kissed a boy? So what?" Chuya seemed stunned into silence. Distantly, Dazai heard a firework go off. Despite how sure he was, it was still a few minutes to midnight. "You don't like a girl. I don't like a girl. You dreamed you kissed a boy. I've never dreamed of kissing anyone. So what if you're a freak? Because I'm a freak too. And if we're not normal together. And maybe there's nothing wrong with that." Dazai sniffled, going quiet as his own tears fell freely down his cheeks. He wiped Chuya's away, making his fingers damp as they brushed over Chuya's red cheeks. Chuya coughed and his eyes lit up as another firework exploded into life. "You mean that?" Chuya asked quietly, shaking his hair out of his face. The two were likely a sorry sight, huddled together in the damp dirt of a dark forest near Chuya's house. But Dazai couldn't care less, as the Velcro on Chuya's jacket got stuck to the fabric of Dazai's expensive jumper Mori had bought for him. It was a stupid decision to give a 13-year-old kid an expensive piece of clothing. Dazai nodded solemnly. "I mean that. In every universe, remember? In every universe." Chuya echoed, voice sounding oddly odd. At once, a series of fireworks took to the sky, signaling the turn of midnight. Both Dazai and Chuya looked up at the lights, eyes wide with wonder as they watched the fireworks through the trees. After a few moments, Chuya cleared his throat and nudged Dazai with his shoulder. "You've seriously never even dreamed of kissing anyone?" Chuya asked teasingly, and Dazai smiled slightly, his drying tears making his cheeks feel cold. "You're seriously wearing shorts in the middle of winter?" he retaliated, pushing back. "Listen, I was warm," Chuya said whinily, pointing and then grinning. Dazai chuckled, and the two went quiet again until Chuya interrupted the quiet. "Do you know what had kicked all this off?" Chuya asked cautiously. "Yeah, it was those kids at the park earlier, and then your parents teasing you about the New Year's kisses, wasn't it?" Dazai guessed. Chuya nodded almost guiltily. "It was just... I had to try so hard to not react earlier, and then I didn't mean anything by saying I thought it was a stupid tradition. But then they were all like, 'Oh, you'll probably change your mind when you get a girlfriend,' and I just... They probably didn't mean anything by it. I'm sure if they had known how you're feeling, they wouldn't have said it." "I know. I think it's just... I don't think I'd mind the New Year's kiss as long as it was a boy. And I don't know how I'm supposed to feel about that," Chuya said, turning to look at Dazai with wide eyes. "Do you think that makes me... wrong?" Dazai paused for a moment to think. "No, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I'd probably kiss a boy too. You'll just have to find a boy who wants a kiss. I'm sure it won't be that hard." "I'll probably never find a boy I like who likes me back. I'll be alone forever." Dazai met Chuya's eyes and grinned. Imagine, Chuya the loser who never got a New Year's kiss. Chuya went red and glared at Dazai. Imagine Dazai the reject who also never got a New Year's kiss. They both went quiet, the sound of fireworks still going off in the distance. "Seriously, how long did these go off for?" Dazai quickly pressed a kiss against Chuya's cheek, pulling back rapidly with a burning face and turning away from Chuya. There was a stunned silence, and Dazai risked turning back to face Chuya again, only to have the kiss clumsily returned, and he went even redder. Chuya huffed dramatically next to him, his arms crossed as he refused to look at Dazai. With a shyness Dazai was rather unfamiliar with, he nudged Chuya with his elbow. "What?" Chuya asked, his voice muffled by what Dazai assumed to be his coat sleeve. Dazai cleared his throat, the way his face felt warm contrasting the cold air surrounding them, and the snow that was beginning to slowly fall. "New Year's kisses are normally on the lips," he said, trying to sound somewhat normal despite the waver in his voice. "Oh, for God's sake," Chuya said with an expression, but it didn't stop him from turning around and grasping Dazai's face between his cold hands. Chuya lost his confidence quickly. They looked at each other with wide eyes, and that image of Chuya with red cheeks, wide blue eyes, and messy red hair with snow in it would be imprinted in Dazai's mind for the rest of his life, along with the "oh shit" realization. So Dazai bridged the gap, a fistful of Chuya's jacket in his hands as he pressed their lips together for barely a few seconds before pulling away rapidly. It was silent, the fireworks stopping as they parted as the snow got heavier. "A few minutes late, but it's fine. Still counts," Dazai said confidently, ignoring the way he felt anything but. "Yeah, it counts," Chuya said, sounding slightly breathless. Dazai swallowed, trying desperately to ignore the taste of the strawberry lip balm Chuya had got in his stocking at Christmas. He had never noticed how nice strawberry smelled or tasted until now. "Now, if you never get a New Year's kiss again, it doesn't matter, because you've had one," Dazai said firmly, and he reached for Chuya's hand, squeezing it tightly. "And if you never find someone to love, I won't either. And we can just be friends forever. Best friends," Chuya added. "Yeah, forever and always, in every universe." If it makes you feel any better, I think we're too young to be talking about love anyway. Chuya's only response was a quiet sniffle. "We should head home. Chuya's house. Just a little longer, please." The slight sadness remaining in Chuya's tone was all Dazai needed. "Okay." "I'm cold." "Dumbass, you shouldn't have worn shorts. Why are you giving me this? You're probably colder than me." A warm brown jumper was thrust into Chuya's hands. "I'll be fine." "Thank you. Next time you run away, bring a blanket." Dazai jumped awake, breathing heavily. His eyes adjusted in the dark to see the cluttered mess that was his room, and he slouched down, covering his mouth with his hand as a sob ripped its way out of his chest. He wiped the tears from his cheeks and curled up on his side again, pulling the blankets over his head. He felt incredibly cold. I smiled so much through reading the near-end segment from how cute it is. The way Silas can incorporate somber and light-hearted moments seamlessly is amazing. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. I feel this was the perfect send-off from 2025. Happy New Year, dear listeners. See y'all in 2026.